Okay, well, to respect everyone's schedules, despite technical difficulties, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Christine, and I am the first chair of the Texas Young Democratic Women's Caucus. Very excited to have you here. Very honored to have our representatives present. I know that we've all probably been on Zoom for 9 hours now, and no one else wants to be on Zoom anymore, but we appreciate your time and we appreciate you being here. Before we kind of go more into depth for this event, I would like to pass the floor to our Texas Young Democrat president just to give a few words of welcome, and then we'll go on with our program.
Hey there, all. Colby Dubehan here. I am super excited not only for this preliminary meeting of the Texas Young Democrats Women's Caucus, but to Christine, our chair, for her leadership, as well as to putting together an incredible group of panelists, all three of which have been champions of this organization the entirety of their time in office. So a massive thanks to all three of those. For their unending support of this organization and for our vision for the youth of this state. I won't monopolize too much more of your time. I am just honored to be here with you this night, and a massive thanks to Christine for all of her work in putting this together.
Thank you so much, Colby, and thank you so much to the rest of the leadership of the Texas Young Democrats, Prince Winbush, Brianna Hutchins, our secretary, Laura. She's been excellent in getting the Zoom put together. If you're just joining us, if you could type some words onto our quick poll here about how you're feeling about the 87th session. I know that some people put hopeful, optimistic, skeptical, business as usual. I think all those things and more apply as we're trying to figure out what this will look like. There'll definitely be more opportunities for you guys to correspond in the chat if you have questions or concerns, but I did want to turn the floor over to our awesome panelists. So I will go ahead and go on to our the introduction of our panelists. We have a few representatives from the House that we wanted to honor for their time, for them being here tonight. We're really appreciative of you coming on. I know like you've probably been in several meetings today. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to give you a brief introduction of who you are, what you're passionate about, and then we can go straight into our questions because I know a few of our representatives need to hop off a little bit earlier. So I will first turn the floor over to Representative Shawn Thierry.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Forgive me, my picture's up right now because I'm actually en route. I've had to pull over. I'm driving back to Houston from Austin, and I got caught in the horrible bad weather and rainstorm, but I didn't want to miss. So forgive me for that. So I've pulled over. But I just would like to say I'm very honored to be here. I'm State Representative Shawn Thierry. I represent Texas House District 146, which encompasses southwest and southeast portions of Houston. I represent parts of the medical center, including Memorial Hermann Hospital, the Women's Hospital of Texas, the VA hospital. And I'm really proud to be the first woman to hold the seat for House District 146 and to serve the incredible constituents of my district. I'm a native Houstonian, born and raised in my district, and I'm now serving my third term in the Texas legislature. I'm proud to serve alongside Representative Howard and Representative Zwiener and a lot of other amazing women in the Texas legislature. On the policy side, I've successfully passed legislation and I'd say raised awareness on the issue of maternal mortality, particularly the rates and the disproportionate rates affecting women of color. And to date, I've authored, I think the last we checked with myself was 90 bills on a range of issues from health equity, anti-human trafficking, mental health, public education, racial justice, and elderly protections. So I'm very honored to join you all today.
Thank you so much for speaking of the work that you've done in the community and how dedicated you are even to being here with us tonight. I hope you're in a safe location, but thank you so much for joining us. I will now turn the floor over to Representative Howard.
Thank y'all so much for having us. And Shawn, definitely, I hope you're safe where you are right now. Please be careful. We need you to get safely home and then back to the Capitol. We are really fortunate in the Texas House to have 38 women right now serving. 31 of those are Democratic women. And we are most diverse in our representation. Without the Democrats, the House would not be very diverse. We have a great diversity of Latinas, African Americans, and white Democratic women. We do not have Asian American at this point in time. The only Asian American woman we have in the House is a Republican, but we do represent, I think, largely the face of Texas, which I'm really proud of. We're at the high point now with women. We had 38 women this time. This is the most women we've ever had in the House out of 150, though. That's still not anywhere near the proportional representation we should be having. The high point prior to this point was in 2008. We had 37. We had finally gotten to 37. And then the 2010 Tea Party elections, midterm elections, decimated us. We lost 24 Democrats that time and lost a significant number of women. And we've been building back up since then. So I'm really grateful that we're finally on the upswing again. I represent, I'm one of 6 representatives in Travis County, the Austin area. And it's hard to say what I represent because of gerrymandering, but it goes all over the place. Bottom line is a large swath of Travis County. And I've been here since 2006. It's been a real challenge as we have gone through multiple sessions of denying women their right to health care, not only just reproductive health care, but health care in general. There's been a lot of collateral damage here. And I am one of those that firmly believes, based on everything I've seen, that it makes a huge difference when women run and women win, and women are a part of setting the agenda of what happens in the legislature. And I know we're going to have some more time to talk about that, but I'm really excited about the fact that y'all are talking to us and that you're involved with this, because we need a lot more women to be on all kinds of elective bodies. And I think that your engagement with this, and hopefully some things that we can do to maybe level the playing field a little bit more, welcoming you into it, will set the stage for having more and more women serve our state. Because once women are more in proportional representation, I think we will see outcomes that will serve not only women, but families all across the state. So thank y'all for having us tonight.
Thank you for that introduction. I feel like you kind of went through like every question I had on that list in your introduction. So thank you so much for that. And I'll turn it over to Representative Sweeter.
Thank you so much, Christine. I'm really honored to be here tonight with my colleagues, Representative Thierry and Representative Donna Howard. I represent House District 45, Hays and Blanco counties, which is just southwest of Austin. It actually is an area that has had many women representatives in the past, which I find interesting that this region of Texas seems to be a little bit better at sending women into the Texas Capitol than others. But I saw a number that was actually reported by Alexa Ura with the Texas Tribune that really, to me, illustrated exactly how deep our representation issues go in Texas. And it's that there have been a total of 179 women who have served in the Texas legislature. That's not enough women to fill every seat in the legislature. There are 181 members at any given time. So there, and I looked up a similar number for the United States Senate. And this, I should say, I have not updated this after the 2020 elections, but before the 2020 elections, there were more men serving in the Senate right then in 2019 than total women had ever been elected. So this is an issue that has added up over time. And it's going to take us a while to really erode that historical underrepresentation. I am glad we are at a new peak. I will admit I'm a little jealous of states like Nevada, where there is now majority women in both chambers. First time any state has had that. And I hope we see more and more women run for office. And I have to say, I hope we see more and more young women run for office. When I was elected, I was the youngest member of the youngest woman member of the Texas House at 33. And quite frankly, 33 is not that young for a first-time candidate. We have had many men in their 20s and early 20s elected to the Texas legislature, but only a very small handful of women. I believe my colleague Mary Gonzalez was actually the youngest woman ever elected to the Texas House when she was 27. And when I was on the campaign trail, one of the things I heard over and over again was, do you have the experience to do this? Are you too young? Are you too this? And my district overlaps with Congressman Lloyd Doggett. So I would just remind folks that he ran for the Texas Senate and won when he was 27. And that President Lyndon B. Johnson was headed to DC when I believe he was 29. So there is a history of electing young people, and we need more women to step up early so that women have the chance to have their careers bloom and to reach the highest levels of office or to gain seniority, which is critical in these legislative bodies. So I'm really grateful to speak to y'all. I'm glad there are young women who are excited about being engaged in politics and hopefully stepping up to run themselves.
Well, thank you all so much for your introductions. I kind of was like going through the questions and I was like, man, like we're in the height of this very intensive session. There's so many things going on. And I was like, and I'm really asking them about their experience, like in their role. Is that really the conversation that needs to be had? And more of your introductions just really confirm that. Just because I feel like everyone wants to sweep what you experience on a day-to-day aside for those like bigger, like big ticket items, when sometimes we do need to bring to the forefront that the way that people communicate or look at you as a woman in politics maybe needs to have some discussion and some changes. The first question I'd like to pose to you all is kind of more about like from the time that you were elected and noting that there were like way less women in the room than there are now. Do you feel like there's been any shift at all in your experience or in the way that your colleagues or the way that organizations perceive you in your roles? And I'll start with Representative Howard because I know you'll have to leave pretty soon. You're muted. I'm sorry.
Sorry, there you go. One of the most significant things that I think has happened recently is that women are talking to each other more and coming together more and being more strategic about how we look at our role on the floor of the House. We have a Speaker of the House who is elected by the membership, as opposed to the Lieutenant Governor, who is a statewide elected official. So the power in the House is really shared a lot by committees and committee chairs. And we have really been fortunate to have more and more women, based on our working together on this and trying to make this happen, more and more women be a part of leadership roles in the House. We have more women, well, actually a similar number of women who are actual chairs, but more women who are vice chairs, but we expanded significantly the representation on some of the substantive committees this time by virtue of trying to work strategically to ensure that happened. So I would say that from when I first came into the legislature to where we are now, I'm seeing more of an effort for women to work together to determine our leadership positions and our ability to affect the agendas of what occurs on the House floor. We're still not anywhere where we need to be, in my opinion, and I think we could all kind of agree to that. In terms of the fact that we don't have proportional representation, but we haven't had a woman Speaker of the House. We nearly have one this time with Representative Synthronia Thompson, who put her name in out there and had a lot of support, and I think had the potential to become our first woman Speaker. It was very disappointing that in a lot of ways that didn't happen, but here we are now with a new Speaker, Dade Phelan, who did pay attention, I think, to the women who indicated that we wanted to be a part of what happens here. And he listened and he made some more appointments, and we gained some ground beyond what we had before. So that's encouraging to me that has happened. At the same time, I do still feel like there's still a lot of this good old boys club there. And that hasn't changed as much as it probably should have, especially after the Me Too movement. We should have seen, I think, a lot more change than what we've seen. But that being said, it is better. And I'm going to go with that for right now, that it's better. But I also agree with Representative Zwiener that we need to see more young people there. We are a very skewed to the older end of the spectrum, skewed to the wider end of the spectrum. And I think part of the issue there has to do with the fact that we are a part-time legislature. Not many people can run for office and leave their jobs 5 months every other year and do all of the committee hearings and town halls and everything else that has to go on in the interim, not to mention the campaigning and the cost of doing all of that. So we really limit opportunities by having a part-time legislature where only those who have their own jobs, they own their jobs, they own their business, they can actually do this kind of a service for 5 months every other year. Those who have spouses perhaps who support them, independently wealthy people. But my point being, it leaves out the vast majority of Texans. And until we allow more Texans in who really represent the Texas experience of all the demographics across our state, then we're not going to be truly a representative body. So I don't know what the answer is there, but I just know that we are not as representative as we need to be. And I'm very hopeful that this group is going to do a lot to change that.
And if either of you, if the representatives want to hop in like one after another, and then I can kind of interject for transition once I feel like we've kind of answered the question.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, sorry, Representative.
Go ahead.
You want me
Go
to
ahead,
yield to
Sean.
you? Oh, okay. I was going to just say, just I guess in 2 words to what Representative Howard said. Right on. Right on. What she said basically. But I think that is really important that for the women listening, that they remain encouraged. And as my grandmother used to say, sometimes it's a slow walk to Christ for some folks, but we're moving the ball down the field 10 yards at a time. We are picking up ground. I believe this session, I don't know if you mentioned this statistic specifically, Rep. Howard. I think there are 19 women that were appointed as either committee chairs and vice chairs. I think 14 chairs and 5 vice chairs. And through the efforts, as Rep. Howard mentioned, of us uniting and joining together and making that a pivotal concern or an issue to the incoming speaker, there were a lot of collaborative efforts from different caucuses speaking on that. So I think that was part of why that happened. This session, my role, I think one of the questions was, how has it changed since I was first elected? It's changed significantly in this sense, even though I have not officially started, but I'm excited to be appointed as vice chair of the, as they call it, the Powerful Ways and Means Committee. But the reason it means so much to me is not for ego, but just from a historic standpoint. I didn't even know until I got that appointment that I'm only the second Black woman to ever even hold that this vice chairmanship. And so we have to look at that as another glass ceiling that's being shattered. And so as our Vice President Kamala said, I may be the first, but I'm certainly not the last. So while I'm the second, I certainly don't intend to be the last. And so we just have to continue to do our part collectively to make the legislature look like the people that we represent. And we see, strides being made, but we have to just continue to lift as we climb. And I think that's an important part. Rep. Howard, as you talked about the age of the average age of some of the members. I think it's really important that we put together some sort of outreach to help new members, not only in their chronological age, but just in their age of being in the body. You know, you can be 50 years old and you're still a freshman. So if you're a woman that comes in, you need the same help as anyone else that may come in half your age. We all end up in the same position when you're a freshman. So I think it's important that we mentor each other and that we work with organizations like Annie's List and your Young Democrats and all of the collective allies so that we can continue to create more opportunities for women.
Yeah, and what I'll add to that is I'm new enough to this body that I have not had as much time to see change as my colleagues. But one of the things that I think was very interesting about the year I came in, and I think we're seeing a similar dynamic with this freshman class, is just what a large percentage of the incoming members have been women. You know, my class, we were notable because there were more Democratic women or freshmen than Republican men freshmen. We outnumbered them, which was quite fun during orientation, but we won't get into that. And that was a class of, I believe, 10 freshman women coming in at once, 10 freshman Democratic women and 11 freshman women total. And this class, you know, almost all of our new Democratic members this session, except one, are women, and they're all fantastic. And the great thing about having these big blocks of women come in at once is it's harder to treat us like a monolith when there are more of us. And we all have our own interests and our own policy corners. And to me, that some of the strength in that is we don't get pigeonholed the way that women often can be into certain policy areas that have been historically coded more feminine. And that's something that's really important to me because I care about all the issues. I care about education and healthcare, the ones that are more traditionally coded as women's issues. In fact, I'm really excited to be serving on public health. But I'm also, you know, an ardent environmentalist. And that's a field in environmentalism, energy, natural resources is a traditionally male field. And so I think us being able to establish our expertise in every corner is really critical. And I see some of that same dynamic with our new freshman class, and I'm glad that we get to keep establishing ourselves in other corners of policy and that we see more even representation throughout the committees.
I think those are all very powerful answers, especially drawing from where you all started into where it is now. And I think as much as every woman is probably going to get off this call and be like super energized to do something, the pressing conversation right now is about testifying at session. So for a lot of us who've been tracking that, there's a lot of changes. It's like, oh, you know, you might have to go and get tested day of, or never mind, you can't testify in person. You can only do written. And I know those like rules are still coming out and changing. As we are preparing to testify at sessions, some of us on some of these issues that are a big deal to us, what do you think is a really good tip or a good takeaway, no matter if we do it in person or online?
Well, let me just start and clarify that my understanding of what we have voted on at this point in terms of the rules of how this is going to work is that there is still going to be in-person testimony allowed. You do not have to test to come into the Capitol, regardless of whether that's good policy or not. That is the way it is. You can test. We have testing available for free in a tent on the north side of the Capitol, which is I believe the only entrance for the public right now is in that north entrance anyway. But in terms of doing virtual testimony, if that's what you choose to do, then the chair of that committee is the one that is the gatekeeper, if you will, of who can provide virtual testimony. It has to be invited. That means, though, that those of us that are members of that committee, and even if we're not members of the committee, if we knew our constituents wanted to testify virtually for whatever reason, we could certainly go to the committee chair and say that, you know, we'd like for this person to be able to testify virtually. And depending on what that chairperson's agenda is for that day and what they think their timing is and whether or not they would allow that to happen, you know, that we could advocate for that. There's also now an opportunity to submit written testimony via a portal that's being set up. I'm not sure if it's totally set up yet, but you can submit written testimony that will be part of the permanent record. So there's a couple of options for how you can physically testify in the House, logistically testify in the House. It's not ideal. It's not like it was before. And certainly for those that have difficulty with traveling, with maybe disabilities, with family needs, with COVID concerns, trying to figure out a way to be able to testify virtually is going to be really important. I know that Representative Zwiener followed up with this on looking specifically at people with disabilities and how this might be limiting for them to be able to make their voice heard. But there's a lot of things we could say about how you do it. I just wanted to start off with some of the basic logistics, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues to kind of take it from there and to correct anything I may have said too that might not be accurate.
I think you were very. Oh, go ahead, Erin. I'm sorry. I was just going in our standard flow. You want to go ahead, Rep. Ziener?
Sure. I agree with everything Rep. Howard said. I am disappointed that we didn't get some sort of how do I want to call it, but just protection clauses to provide a little bit of a backstop if a chair is not willing to invite anyone for virtual testimony. But my understanding is that House leadership is going to be encouraging chairs to set up a process for virtual testimony. And we did get some language into the rules saying that chairs are supposed to be providing equal access to a diversity of viewpoints to use virtual testimony. We don't really have an enforcement mechanism, but that expectation has been set. So I'm going to remain optimistic until I have evidence to stop being optimistic about it. But that online portal should be set up soon. The House Administration Committee looked at some sort of draft options of it this week. And so I know the admin committee is working on that, and I expect the chair will have that up and available soon. And the great thing about that written portal is you can use it from anywhere in the state. Previously, if you wanted to drop off written testimony at the House, you had to do just that. You had to physically show up and drop it off. And that testimony will be part of the official record. Members will be able to pull all of it up and look at it as well. And we certainly will be encouraging our colleagues to look at things that we think are particularly informative on the issues. I think if there's something you want to testify on and you really want to testify virtually, the important thing is if you are tied with an organization, to work with that organization to help them get a priority list to the chair and put yourself on it, because I expect a lot of that access will be a little easier at the advocacy groups. If that's not an option, talk to, if you're in support of a bill, talk to the author of the bill and see if they can encourage you to be one of the invited witnesses. And then you can also talk to your member of the legislature and see if they can help you with that invitation. Again, the chair of the committee is who is going to have the ability to invite folks. I'm hopeful that at least some of them will have, publicly viewable sign-up processes, but we haven't really seen how that's unfurled yet. So we're all sort of exploring the unknown here. I do want to encourage you, if you come to the Capitol, to be protective of yourself. We have consistently had COVID cases in the Capitol for at least a few months now. So I do want to encourage everyone to be cautious. If you come in, wear a mask, be the person that looks a little bit rude and gets up and walks away from the person who is not wearing their mask correctly if you need to, and try to, try to protect your space as you're in the building. I'm also hopeful we're going to be a little bit better about notifying people about timelines for testimony and not set up situations where we have people waiting for 12 hours in the building for their turn to testify. But we're going to see how this rolls out. And again, if you're struggling with access to the building, I think the best contact is your member of the legislature to see if they can help you find some solutions.
I would just add that all of those that's basically exactly the way to go in terms of trying to make sure that you're able to reach these members in the traditional sense or in the virtual space. One thing I did want to encourage you all to do, particularly as Texas Young Democrats, is think outside of the box, or should I say in this instance, outside of the dome. And please use the power of your platforms. to speak truth to power. That is one way you can do that. You have the power of social media. So if you cannot make it to the Capitol, or if it's not safe to do that, and you're not able, if the chair is not going to allow virtual testimony, that doesn't mean that you cannot hashtag the what out of a bill number or an issue, and you can at that chair numerous times, and those committee members on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Most of the members of the legislature now have social media pages. And so I just want to make sure that you all don't underestimate the influence that you have. News travels at the speed of light, as you know, on social media. And so a lot of times I make the joke that, if it's not on social media, it didn't happen. So continue to make sure that you're using that as well. Even though you may not be able to testify in the traditional sense, this session, you can still influence.
I think that is very helpful. And thank you so much, Representative Howard, for going through the entire, protocol and everything. Because I think, when we've seen so many different things, I think that's the beauty and the curse of the internet. Like, the same articles keep circulating, and now that's old information when there's new information that's come out. So thank you so much for all of your recommendations. I think that will be very helpful. I want to segue to 2 more questions of my own and then turn it over to the audience. Audience members, you're able to go to this link right here on your phone or computer and type in questions for the presenters so that we can end very close to at 7, wanting to respect everyone's time. The question that I wanted to turn over to next what would be your advice for women who are looking into going into directly into a legislative role or at organizing in some type of advocacy group? I think that there's so many routes and avenues that you can take, but I would love to hear your experiences kind of about where you started if some people are very new to the space. And I will start with Representative Thiry, since Representative Howard has started the last few times.
Sure. So I'll start with first, just in terms of if you're a woman and you're thinking about, was your first part of the question if you're thinking about running for an elected position? I just want to clarify, was that the first part of your question?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll just speak from my personal experience, because I did not plan it. It wasn't kind of that I thought that I was going to become state rep. I actually ran for a judicial position, and then ended up not winning that position. And then lo and behold, as the universe would have it, a month later, this opportunity came about, and I took a chance and worked really hard, and then was able to win the seat. But one of the things I would encourage women to do is don't go it alone. I did that, and it was unnecessarily hard. And sometimes that's the way it is, as Rep. Howard has been speaking, that if you don't have these mentors and these groups to reach out to, but I see that is growing. Annie's List did jump on board and help me. And I know on the national level, we have Emily's List. So I would make sure that you do the outreach organizations that can help you with things such as, increasing your footprint on social media and in traditional media, and helping you fundraise. That's another area that we don't talk as much about, is that men traditionally outraise women across the board in fundraising. Even, and it's not just in seats that necessarily may be a swing seat from time to time. There are times where we look at the fact that a male legislator may come in and be a freshman and raise more money, even on less influential committees, than a woman who has been there for a decade on more influential committees. So we have to talk about ways that we can do a better job of helping women raise money as well, because that's really what it takes to be able to sustain the sustainability. And then I would just say, on a real life meat and potatoes issue, get your ducks in a row with your friends, your family. It takes a village, they say, to raise a child. It takes a village to help you run too. I'm going to speak as a mom of an 8-year-old who was only 4 when I got started. I had to have people to help me with my daughter to babysit. I would bring her with me on the campaign trail. I've brought her prior to COVID for the past 2 sessions. She would be with me on the House floor, sitting there with her headphones on, with her iPad. She'd be with me in committees. I think that we were all on a call recently. I think you were for sure, Rep. Howard, about the Texas Ethics Commission and its rules on allowing women to be able to use our campaign funds to pay for babysitting when we're out here campaigning, and that's a national movement as well. So make sure if you are a mom or if you have more than one child that you reach out and establish a tribe or a village or a squad, whatever you want to call it, to help you. And I think that is so important that we don't go it alone.
I think that's all really great advice, Rep. Theory. Especially, as a mother, as a mother of a young child as well, that village is certainly important. And I have to say, I'm so grateful for the many people who have helped me figure out how to balance those pieces as I serve. The other thing I think that is just so critical, and this is a little bit of a cliche, but show up. I mean, the world is run by people who show up, and that is a huge factor. So I was a little bit of a surprise candidate and then a surprise win in my district, both in the primary and the general. And the real key to my success was I showed up at everything. And initially me showing up, folks knew I was interested in running. They knew I was kind of dipping my toes in. They weren't sure how seriously to take me. But I helped some of our local city council candidates block walk. I helped some of our precinct chairs get out the vote work for city council races and earned their respect and friendship. The more I showed up, the more I helped and participated in voter registration drives. And quite frankly, that work and the relationships I built through that work, it both taught me what I needed to do to run, and then it earned me local grassroots support from a lot of the people most involved in our county party. And quite frankly, that's why I was able to win my primary. Well, I actually didn't win the primary. I came in second in the primary. That's why I was able to win my runoff as a relative political newcomer in my community. And so that piece of just showing up, getting engaged, being willing to get your hands dirty and help is really critical. And any work you can do on a campaign to learn the nuts and bolts is going to prepare you to take that step yourself if that's the choice you want to make. And it's going to build those relationships. It's also going to mean you know more things and you know more tools. I talked about the relationships from me helping with GOTV work for city council races and voter registration drives. It also taught me personally how to block walk. And block walking is why I won both my runoff and my general election, because we figured out how to do it well and do it efficiently. And along the way with that work, we were able to build, an army of volunteers that came out and got on the ground with us. So again, I know it's cliche, but show up, help out. People notice that, and if they see you working hard before you're asking them for something, they're going to be more likely to trust that you'll continue to work hard once you're elected.
Well, I think you've heard from these two moms how difficult it is to juggle all these things, and not to say that men don't have to juggle things, but I'm here to tell you it's not the same. And I certainly can tell you with Representative Zwiener, as she was nursing her baby on the House floor, that's something that only women are having to deal with. So women do have a lot more challenges, quite frankly, to make this work. And I'm one of those that didn't run until I was older. I'm one of those that didn't run until my kids were grown. And, it made a huge difference for me to be able to do things, to not have those challenges. There's been other challenges that I've had to deal with, but that was not one of them. Just to back up a second, I'm one of those that grew up I graduated from high school and started college in '69. So basically in the 70s. What was happening on college campuses then, lots of political activities, and I got involved in basically all of them, and never over the years thought about myself as running as an elected official, but was very engaged in working on those things that I cared about. And I think to me, that's one of the most important things, is that you work on those things that feed your soul, that feed your passion, that allow you to know that you are here making a difference in your world, whatever that is. And then there's different doors that might open up and you walk through them. I always talk about the fact that from my generation, unfortunately, women so often had to be asked, as I had to be asked. I never offered myself for things that maybe I even thought inside I could do. It just wasn't something we did. You know, I had to be asked to consider running. Not now. Right now, I feel like I'm pretty good at stepping up and saying, yeah, I can do this, and or I'm going to tackle that. But, you know, it took me many years to get here. Hopefully you younger people don't have to wait that long. You can actually say, you know, I have some things to offer here, and I'm willing to do it, and I'm ready to do it, and I'm going to step up and offer myself to do it. Working on campaigns is absolutely a great way to gain a lot of skill and knowledge. And oh, by the way, when I first won this seat in 2006, one of the people that I hired was somebody who worked on my campaign, who had previously worked with another legislator. So there was that positive there. But then another person I hired, he was a volunteer on my campaign. It was the first time he'd ever volunteered for anything, but he was awesome. And I hired him, and he ended up not only working for me from the beginning, but eventually becoming my chief of staff at one point in time. And now he's actually a policy director for a statewide association. You never know what's going to happen. Get out there and work on these campaigns and work with these advocacy groups, and doors can open for you. So, you know, I just think, again, it's doing the things that mean something to you. No point in working on stuff you don't care about, or that you know, that you really don't have your heart in it. Work on those things you care about. There's enough of that out there, and you can make a difference while you're doing that. And also perhaps get to a certain place where you can find ways to serve beyond what you maybe even thought at the beginning. So I'm just glad to be around all these young women who are stepping up and taking part of these leadership roles at an earlier age, where they have a lot more ahead of them to work on. I'm at the end of my period of time, and you know, I'd love to be able to have more juice in me to go further, and I will do what I can as long as I can. But starting out earlier gives you more opportunity to be a part of a lot of things along the way. So I'm really, really glad to see all of the young women and young men who are looking at what their role might be here and how they can step up and be a part of this. And as you said earlier, I'm sorry, I have to be on another panel, so I'm going to have to cut out now. But thank y'all so much for having me. And I'm going to leave you in the good hands of my colleagues here, who I know are going to have a lot more to say to you. So thank y'all very much.
Rep Howard, before you go, I want to say we're not letting you go anywhere that quickly. You're not at the end of anything. You're just getting revved up. She's got her foot on the gas. She applies pressure. Everybody knows that. So she's very humble, but we're not letting her leave with that note. I suspect that she chose to, it's certainly her free will, but she could be the dean of the women's house, much like Ms. T. So we'll have a Ms. H. So we honor you, and we appreciate you so much, Rep Howard. You are truly a leader, and you leave your heart on the field, and you play all 4 quarters and overtime. So I want to thank you for that, and don't you dare go anywhere.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah. We just got you on State Affairs.
Now I am going to the meeting.
Okay.
Well, again, thank you all so much for your time. We are coming. Thank you so much, Representative Howard. We are coming to the close of our discussion, but I do want to just turn it over to a couple of the questions that were turned in from the audience members. And then I'm also going to put a link in the chat for a survey just about the event, or some ideas if anyone has any for the Women's Caucus in general. I'm going to combine my last question with the question about bills during session. So between Representative Zwiener and Representative Thiry, is there things that you're working on this session that you feel like are hot topic issues that the Women's Caucus needs to be focusing on and continuing to look at?
You want to go first, Rep Zwiener, or you?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, Rep. Howard is the chair of our Women's Health Caucus, and we have definitely identified some priorities already. One of the areas that we've identified is to eliminate systemic and social issues of disparities in healthcare facing our vulnerable communities, particularly communities of color, Black Texans. So I have numerous pieces of legislation that are addressing that. One of them just got some press today in an article, which is the Crown Act. I have filed that bill to address hair discrimination, as we have seen across the nation and even in Texas, where Black Americans are being punished at work, literally fired or expelled from school for simply wearing their God-given natural hair, or being forced to conform to a European standard of hairstyle. So I have filed legislation to support that. I have bills that, I have one other bill particularly that wants to reestablish the Office of Health Equity, which was an agency that we had before that addressed racial disparities in Texas from a health equity standpoint. And we're hoping to reestablish that. I don't want to take up too much time, but there were issued more legislation on maternal mortality, cultural competency training. All of these issues, I believe, are very important to my district. And so I would just encourage everyone to, I'm always available. I keep in, well, it literally used to say an open door, but it's not technically open right now because of COVID, but we are available by Zoom and to make appointments. If you would love, I would love for you all to get involved with our bills and to help us as an advocacy group and to be a stronger ally. So I have a myriad of bills that deal with women's issues and even elderly protections. I just really, I would say, try to be a voice for the voiceless. And so whether it's anti-human trafficking or the like. So I don't want to go through the whole package because I know it's way too many. I think it's 33 bills. And so I consider them my babies and I love them all. So I would just say for you all to please take a look and get involved. And if there are areas that you support, I'm ready and willing to work with you. And then I'll yield to my colleague.
Yeah, I'm going to get on my election soapbox for another minute because I realized there was one other thing I wanted to say, and then I'll talk about bills. We had 12 flippers in my class in 2018, and then we had one flipper this past year. Out of the flippers from 2018, 8 of them were women, 4 of them were women of color, and 2 were queer women. We had our one flipper this year, also a woman and a queer woman. And the reason I bring this up is because the narrative for so long was if you want to go flip a seat, you have to run a SAFE candidate. And SAFE was code for straight white cis dude. We've turned that on its head. We have absolutely turned that on its head, and we have proven that diverse people are competitive in our general elections. And so I just want to encourage y'all, never let anybody tell you that's the reason you shouldn't run, because you don't need some idea they have in their head of what type of candidate can win an election. The candidates who win elections are the candidates who show up, talk to voters, and convince them that they will fight for them. And your demographics are not a barrier, full stop. And we have seen that demonstrated again and again all around the country. With women and women of color and queer women stepping up and winning competitive seats. So that's my soapbox on that. Regarding legislation, I'd really love y'all to follow. We are refiling a piece of legislation with Senator Zaffirini that came within a hair's breadth of passing last session. And it's what it would do is it would allow women at every single workplace in the state of Texas to file a sexual harassment claim. In Texas, right now, you can only file a sexual harassment claim if you work somewhere with 15 or more employees. This leaves out about 300,000 Texas workers who have no due process whatsoever when experiencing workplace sexual harassment. So I'm really hopeful we're going to move that forward this session. I would love y'all to follow that and keep an eye on it. I'm very excited about legislation several of my colleagues have filed to make sure that women who are postpartum can stay on Medicaid for a year after they give birth. Right now, Texas kicks folks off at 60 days after giving birth. Someone who gave birth relatively recently, I can tell you it's pretty difficult to get yourself out of the house within 60 days to get your routine checkups afterwards. So it's really critical to give that longer access, because about half of postpartum deaths occur after that 60-day period. So this is a really basic way to deal with some of our maternal mortality issues, as well as deal with postpartum depression and other postpartum complications. And then some personal legislation I would really love y'all to keep an eye on. As I mentioned, I work on environmental issues. That's my biggest passion. And we have just filed legislation yesterday, House Bill 1820, to up penalties for folks who pollute our air and our water. So we're trying to give the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, the agency that is responsible for enforcing our environmental protections, we're trying to give them big enough teeth that they can actually be effective, because we've had too many folks slipping through the cracks, breaking the rules, dealing with minimum fines, and just moving on, who have been polluting our air and our water, having negative health impacts for Texans, and also leading to some catastrophic incidents, like the KMCO explosion, the Arkema fire, the ITC fire. So I really want us to stop that and make sure our regulatory agency has the tools they need. And I would love y'all to follow that legislation and support us on it.
Well, thank you both so much for your time. I'll give us one last question just to close this out. And then if any of the members on the call haven't already done this, please fill out the survey. But last question for both of you, what was the best advice you were given while you were running for office?
Well, I guess I'll start. It looks like it's my time. And this is, I really don't mean it to be tongue in cheek, but it underscores the point that you really have to live your own truth and go with what you feel is right for you. I've received advice. It wasn't only just for running for office, but I think one of the best pieces of advice I received was from a mentor that told me, don't listen to advice. And I mean that in the sincerest way, which is that, and this is obviously advice, but what I mean it really to say is that don't be overly dependent on others' guidelines and parameters, because if I would have done that, I would not be here today in my seat. So I think the most important thing I would tell people is do not let your destiny be defined by all of these arbitrary, as we would say, identifiers, whether they be race or gender or culture or color. So we've seen now with our vice president, first Black woman to be vice president, first woman of Asian descent to become vice president, that, we can shatter those glass ceilings. So I think ultimately I want to let people know, young people know, young Democrats know, is that you really can carve out your own destiny. Don't be defined by what you haven't seen happen before, because there's always going to be a first, and you might as well be that first.
I think that's great advice. And what I'll say to build on that a little is know who your people are. Know who the people that you really trust, and talk to them and ask them to be there to be your rock and your support while you're running for office. Running for office tests us in some incredible ways. I alluded a little bit to my 2018 year. I mean, I had a primary, a runoff, and a general. And I had a rough time in the primary, just personally, because we had someone, the person who did not make the runoff, who was very ugly and attacked me in some ways based on my age and my gender and my sexual orientation, and spread lies and rumors about me. And it was really hard. And you need those people that can bring you back to your values and talk you down. You know, there were several things where I was like, well, do we fire back? What do we do? And having those people I could pick up the phone and talk to and say, Erin, go talk to your voters. Like, you can vent to me, tell me all the mean thoughts you have, tell me all your snark. Now you go out there and be yourself and talk to voters and do that work. And knowing who those people are who you can talk to in those hard moments, I think is really critical to success, and to helping you stay true to yourself as you're doing this work.
Well, thank you both for your time, for all that you're doing in your community, for your transparency. I think that this was a really great eye-opening conversation, hopefully for the men on this call, hopefully for the women on this call, to figure out what we can do next as an organization to really support what you're doing, but also get a team or a tribe around the women who are going to be running after you, alongside you. I mean, I think this was a really great event, and I really, really appreciate your time, especially during all the craziness. And like, I hear Representative Sweeney that you have a lot going on in the background, so I already know that this is probably your family time. And Representative Theory, hopefully you are in a safe location, or you're en route back to your house and you're doing well. But thank you all so much for joining us this evening. This will be the first of a series of events where we talk about women in different fields. So we talked about the discussion on women in STEM, women in the healthcare, women at home, and what that kind of looked like during this period of time, and definitely wanting to open the door for us to look at what kind of organizing actions we're going to take as a caucus. Again, my name is Christine Malpoint, very honored to be the chair. Next time I'll be joined by our vice chair, Ms. Alyssa DeQuint, and our secretary, Caitlin Zimmer. I appreciate your time, and you all have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us. You all are really some wonderful soldiers and warriors in the arena. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.